A chorus of confirmations rang through the bridge. Massive cannons extended from the Zervax warships, humming with charged energy. This was always the same. The first wave was meant to cripple planetary defenses before the ground invasion began. Cities would burn, communication networks would be shattered, and resistance would crumble before it could even begin. Zyrek leaned forward, watching as the first wave of plasma bombardment streaked toward Earth's surface. This was the moment he always enjoyed. The moment a civilization realized its end had arrived. The bolts of plasma fire slammed into the atmosphere. And vanished. Zyrek's brow furrowed. He turned to Kelvax. What just happened? Kelvax's fingers flew over the control panel, eyes widening. Supreme Commander, the bombardment was intercepted. Zyrek narrowed his eyes. Impossible. But the evidence was clear. The humans had activated some form of energy dispersal field, nullifying the plasma strikes before they reached the ground. On the holographic display, Earth's surface remained untouched. Then, something even stranger happened. The Zervax fleet's targeting systems shut down. Commander. We're losing weapon locks, a panicked officer reported. Our targeting computers are. The war room plunged into darkness for a brief second before flickering red lights replaced the usual glow of the command consoles. Emergency alarms howled across the ship. Kelvax's voice wavered. Sir, they're hacking our systems. Zyrek's fist slammed into his armrest. How? No species has ever bypassed Zervax encryption. But humanity had. A ripple of unease spread through the warlords on the bridge. The humans hadn't just been waiting for them. They had been preparing. A new voice crackled through the Zervax communication system, overriding their own encrypted channels. It was the same man as before. General Cole. This is General Cole of the United Earth Defense Forces, the voice said, calm and measured. We knew you'd come. And we're ready for you. Zyrek's grip tightened around his chair. Jam their signal, he barked. No use, sir, Kelvax said grimly. They're inside our networks. The Zervax command room flickered again, and then the main screen displayed something that made Zyrek's blood turn cold. A map of his entire fleet. Every ship. Every formation. Every vulnerability. You thought we were weak, Cole continued. You thought we'd panic, beg for mercy. But you made a mistake, Supreme Commander. Zyrek's teeth clenched. Shut him off. But before the signal cut, Cole spoke one last sentence, his voice filled with grim certainty. You should have studied us harder. And then, the first human counterattack began. The battle begins. Across the vastness of space, unseen forces suddenly emerged from the void. Human warships, smaller than their Zervax counterparts but faster, more agile, burst from hidden positions behind the moon and within the asteroid belt. Their weapons were unconventional, their movements unpredictable. The first Zervax warship to react turned its cannons toward an advancing human battlecruiser, only for its weapons to fail mid-charge. The ship's systems flickered, scrambled by Earth's cyber warfare units. Then, human railguns fired. Long metallic slugs, moving at near-light speeds, punched through the first Zervax warship like a hot knife through ice. The alien vessel shuddered. Explosions rippled across its hull, and within seconds, the mighty Zervax ship was torn apart. Zyrek stared at the destruction, momentarily frozen. The war had barely begun, and he had already lost a capital ship. The humans had adapted faster than any species he had ever encountered. He rose from his seat. Deploy fighter squadrons. Activate full evasive maneuvers. But the chaos only deepened. More Zervax ships found themselves helpless. Human electromagnetic pulses disabled shields. Stealth fighters darted between the behemoth alien warships, striking with terrifying precision. The Zervax fleet was larger, more technologically advanced, yet it was the humans who controlled the battlefield. Zyrek turned to Kelvax. "Tell me we have a way to counter them." Kelvax hesitated. "Sir, this isn't just warfare. They're outthinking us." He swallowed. "They don't fight like any species we've conquered before." Zyrek's eyes burned with fury. "Then it's time we remind them why the Zervax are the most feared race in the galaxy." He turned back toward the main screen, voice like iron. "Prepare the planetary annihilation beam. If we can't break their defenses, we'll break the planet itself." The Zervax flagship trembled as the planetary annihilation beam powered up. On the war chamber's central screen, the glowing core of the weapon pulsed, its energy output climbing to levels capable of reducing continents to ashes. Zyrek's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Let's see them counter this." Kelvax hesitated. "Supreme Commander, are we certain?" "The humans. They are pests," Zyrek snapped. "They may have surprises, but no species has withstood the planetary annihilation beam." Kelvax fell silent, but something in his posture was tense. Zyrek turned back to the screen, watching as the beam generator reached full charge. The countdown began. 5. 4. 3. Then, the screen glitched. For a fraction of a second, the entire war chamber's lighting dimmed. Readouts flickered. Symbols turned to gibberish. Kelvax's head jerked toward his console. "Sir." The beam shut down. The countdown froze. The core's energy plummeted. Emergency sirens wailed across the flagship. "What?" Zyrek roared, fists clenching. Kelvax's eyes were wide. "They've hacked the weapon. Humanity's secret weapon." Far below, on Earth's surface, a team of human operatives sat in a dimly lit underground command center. Their leader, Dr. Lillian Hayes, smirked as she watched the Zervax fleet's most terrifying weapon fall silent. "Looks like they found out we don't just fight with bullets," she said. A younger officer, eyes glued to his console, let out a breath. "That was close. If that beam had fired." Hayes nodded. "But it didn't. Because they never expected a species as primitive as us to fight with information. For years, Earth's brightest minds had anticipated this day. They had watched as alien empires warred among themselves, waiting for the moment humanity would be noticed. And unlike other civilizations that had crumbled under superior firepower, humans had spent decades preparing an unconventional defense. The Atlas program, humanity's secret weapon, wasn't just about military firepower. It was a war of data. It was a network of AI, hackers, and cyber warfare teams capable of crippling even the most advanced alien technology. The Zervax had arrived expecting a conventional war. Instead, they had walked into a battlefield they couldn't even see. Hayes leaned forward. "Now," she said, eyes gleaming, "let's show them what happens when you underestimate us." She pressed a single button. The Zervax fleet falls into chaos. On board the Zervax flagship, Zyrek's fury was reaching a breaking point. "Get the beam back online," he barked. Kelvax's fingers flew over the control panel. "Sir, they've rewritten the core's command structure. We can't." Before he could finish, the bridge went dark. Then, the entire fleet lost control. All over the Zervax armada, ships suddenly turned against each other. Weapons systems malfunctioned. Shields dropped. Targeting sensors realigned, now marking Zervax warships as enemies. Across the fleet, captains shouted in confusion as their own weapons locked onto their own allies. The war chamber's emergency lighting flickered to red. Zyrek stared at the chaos unfolding before him. For the first time in his life, he felt fear. The human counterattack begins. As the Zervax struggled with their failing systems, the humans struck. Hidden warships, previously cloaked within the asteroid belt, emerged in a perfectly coordinated assault. Their railguns shredded Zervac's capital ships that were left helpless without shields. On the surface, Earth's forces pushed forward, taking back territory at an alarming rate. The Zervac's ground forces, once so confident, now found themselves cut off from reinforcements. General Cole, watching from his command center, exhaled as the reports flooded in. "They're falling apart," an officer said. Cole's jaw tightened. "Not yet," he muttered. "But they will." He turned to his communications officer. "Send the message." The officer nodded and patched him through. A moment later, Zyrek's war chamber was filled with a transmission, one from the very species he had sought to conquer. Cole's voice came through, clear and calm. "You don't look so invincible now." The final blow. Zyrek's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. His empire, the great and mighty Zervac's empire, was unraveling before his eyes. "Sir," Kelvax whispered, barely able to process the words. They outplayed us." Zyrek refused to accept it. "No," he growled. "We adapt." His mind raced. There had to be a way. They were still the most powerful warriors in the galaxy. They could still crush the humans, if only they could regain control. Then, another alert flashed across the war chamber. The humans had hijacked their fleet's navigation systems. Zyrek barely had time to process it before reality struck. His flagship's engines, along with the engines of the entire fleet, had just been reprogrammed. And they were moving. "Sir, our ships are," Kelvax's voice broke. "They've turned our fleet against us." The Zervac's warships, now out of their control, realigned. Their massive weapons, still operational, locked onto each other. Zyrek had one final, horrifying realization. The humans weren't just winning this battle. They were making sure the Zervacs never returned. "Fire," Cole ordered. And in a single instant, the Zervac's fleet tore itself apart. Zyrek's escape pod tumbled through space, the cold emptiness swallowing the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. Flames and debris drifted in the void, marking the graves of countless Zervac's warriors. His empire, his legacy, had been reduced to scattered embers. For the first time in his long and ruthless reign, Zyrek knew what it felt like to be hunted. Inside the cramped pod, his claws tightened into fists. The humans had done this. They had taken his fleet, his empire, and twisted his own weapons against him. Unthinkable. No species had ever fought the Zervacs this way. No species had ever won. Yet here he was. Defeated. A sharp beep interrupted his thoughts. The emergency console blinked, a distress signal from one of the few surviving Zervac's warships. He slammed his claw onto the controls. "Commander Vekis," a voice crackled through, strained but alive. "We have survivors. Rendezvous at the Dark Abyss Nebula." Zyrek exhaled slowly. Not all is lost. He punched in the coordinates. The pod's engines flared, carrying him toward the last remnants of his once mighty fleet. This war was not over. Humanity's next move. On Earth, General Cole stood before a war table, watching real-time data streams of the battle's aftermath. The Zervac's fleet had been obliterated. Survivors had scattered, fleeing in all directions. "We did it," a lieutenant murmured. Cole exhaled. "No. We won a battle. Not the war." The room fell silent. They all knew the Zervacs would not accept defeat. Not yet. Dr. Lillian Hayes, the architect of the cyber warfare attack, stepped forward. "We intercepted a transmission. Zyrek escaped." Cole's jaw tightened. "Where?" Hayes tapped on her tablet, bringing up a holographic projection of a nebula deep in Zervac's controlled space. "The Dark Abyss Nebula," she said. If he's regrouping, that's where he'll be. Cole folded his arms. Then that's where we go. Murmurs spread through the command center. Attacking the Zervax at their own stronghold? It was insanity. Or, it was exactly what the Zervax would never expect. Zyrek's last stand. The Dark Abyss Nebula was a storm of swirling gas and violent radiation, a perfect hiding spot for what remained of the Zervax fleet. Here, in the shadows, Zyrek surveyed his forces. Barely 100 warships remained. A fraction of what he had once commanded. Inside the war chamber of the last surviving Zervax dreadnought, his officers stood in grim silence. The warlords who had once laughed at humanity were now desperate, wounded, afraid. Zyrek's eyes burned with rage. He would not allow his empire to end like this. If the humans wanted war, they would burn for it. We will not run, he growled. We will not surrender. Vekis, still bandaged from the ground battle, stepped forward. Supreme Commander, we cannot win in open battle. Not like before. Zyrek's claws curled around the hilt of his ceremonial blade. Then we will not fight as we did before. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. We will fight like them. The trap is set. As the human fleet prepared for its final assault, Cole studied the data before him. The Zervax were making no moves to retreat. No distress signals. No regrouping at known outposts. They're waiting for us, Hayes murmured. Cole nodded. They know we're coming. A calculated risk. The Zervax were powerful warriors, but they had never adapted like this. If they were truly learning from humanity, then this final battle would not be one of brute force, it would be one of strategy. The fleet moved into position. Then, the first trap was sprung. The Zervax adapt. As soon as the human warships entered the nebula, ghost signals flooded their sensors. Phantom fleets appeared on radar, mimicking human distress calls, luring squadrons into dead zones. Within moments, the first human battleships were lost. Torpedoes emerged from the swirling nebula, striking before defenses could activate. Human ships that had been so dominant in open space suddenly found themselves blinded. Cole's gut twisted as the reports came in. They're jamming us, Hayes said, hands flying over her console. No, Cole muttered. They're learning. Zyrek's voice cut through their comms. You fought well, General Cole, he said, voice smooth as silk. But you should have finished the job when you had the chance. Cole clenched his jaw. We still will. Zyrek chuckled darkly. No. You've stepped into our battlefield now. The human fleet was in chaos. Inside his warship's command center, General Cole watched as 1/3 of their fleet vanished in the opening moments of the ambush. Phantom signals had lured ships into dead zones, where cloaked Zervax warships tore them apart with precision strikes. Human defenses, once so effective, had been neutralized in the shifting storms of the nebula. Cole clenched his fists. The Zervax had adapted. They had learned from us. And now, they were playing by our rules. The enemy had jammed their communications, scrambling fleet coordination. What had once been their greatest strength, strategic unity, was now their greatest weakness. A holographic display flickered before Cole, revealing Dr. Lillian Hayes, her face tight with tension. We can't win this fight, General, she said. They've baited us in too deep. Our systems are compromised, and the fleet is breaking formation. Cole exhaled slowly. He had fought dozens of wars, but never against an enemy that had turned his own tactics against him. And yet, they still made one mistake, he muttered. Hayes frowned. What mistake? Cole's eyes burned with determination. They think they've outsmarted us. That will panic. That will retreat. He turned toward his officers. But we're human. We don't break. We adapt. The plan that changed everything. Across the battlefield, Zervak's warships pressed their advantage. They had studied human battle strategies, flanking maneuvers, feints, misdirection. Zyrek watched from his war chamber, his confidence returning with every moment. See how they scramble, he mused. They are predictable. Commander Vekis, standing beside him, nodded. They are trying to regroup, but our interference is blocking their signals. Zyrek leaned forward. Press the attack. Force them to scatter. This war ends now. But as the Zervak's forces advanced, something shifted. The human fleet, once in disarray, stopped moving. Zyrek frowned. What are they doing? Then, the Zervak's ships lost their targeting locks. A moment later, the entire nebula erupted in fire. The human counterstrike. From deep inside the nebula, pre-placed fusion warheads detonated. The humans had anticipated the Zervak's ambush. The artificial explosions created intense radiation spikes, scrambling Zervak's sensors and forcing their ships into disarray. Suddenly, the hunters had become the hunted. Cole's voice cut through the static of the battlefield. All ships, Phase 2. Now. Across the fleet, human warships didn't retreat. They advanced. The Zervak's fleet, still disoriented, found itself surrounded. Human warships reappeared from blind spots, striking at weak points with ruthless precision. For the first time, Zyrek felt fear. They knew, he snarled. They lured us in. The Zervaks, the mighty conquerors of countless worlds, had fallen for the oldest human trick in the book, the bait and trap. A battle of wills. Inside his command ship, Cole stood tall. He knew this battle would decide everything. Send the final message, he ordered. A transmission broadcasted across the battlefield, to Zyrek directly. You're finished, Cole said, his voice steady. Call off your fleet. Surrender now. Silence. Then, Zyrek's reply. A deep, chilling laugh. You think this is over? Zyrek sneered. I will never surrender to you. His warship lunged forward, aiming for the human command ship. Zyrek was going to end it personally. The final showdown. The two flagships collided in a vicious duel. Weapons blazed across the void. Shields flared as energy beams crashed against reinforced hulls. Fighters swarmed around them like angry hornets. Inside the Zervak's command bridge, Zyrek's claws clenched. If he couldn't conquer humanity, he would destroy them. Inside the human command bridge, Cole stood firm. If humanity was going to fall, they would make history doing it. The battle reached its climax. Only one would survive. Cliffhanger ending and lead-in to Part 6. The war had come down to this final, brutal engagement. One ship would fall. One leader would die. The galaxy held its breath. Cliffhanger question. Would it be humanity's greatest victory, or its final hour? The void of space burned with the dying embers of war. Two colossal warships clashed in a final, desperate duel, Zyrek's Zervak's flagship versus General Cole's human command ship. Lasers sliced through the darkness, railgun rounds shattered armor plating, and torpedoes left blazing trails across the battlefield. Fighters wove between the chaos, some exploding in brilliant fireballs, others maneuvering in deadly dogfights. Inside his command center, General Cole gripped the armrest of his chair as the ship's hull trembled under the relentless assault. Warning alarms blared. Shields at 12%. They're focusing all fire on us, sir, an officer shouted. Cole didn't flinch. Hold the line. He knew this was coming. Zyrek had abandoned all strategy, his pride wouldn't allow him to retreat. He wanted vengeance. Zyrek's fury. On the Zervak's warship, Zyrex's claws dug into the metal of his throne-like seat. His face was twisted in a mix of rage and exhilaration. "You humans think you've won," he growled, eyes burning. "You think this battle proves your strength?" His bridge shook as another human railgun slug punched through the hull, but he didn't care. Victory or death, that was all that remained. He turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare for ramming speed." The officer hesitated. "Supreme Commander, that will." Zyrex slammed a fist into the console. "Do it." His ship lurched forward, engines roaring to full burn. If he could not win this war, he would take Cole with him. The collision course. Back on Cole's bridge, the moment his officers saw the Zervax flagship charging straight for them, a chill ran through the crew. "He's coming right at us," Hayes said, eyes wide. "We can't take a direct hit from that thing." Cole's expression hardened. Zyrex wasn't just attacking, he was making this personal. "Divert all power to forward shields," he ordered. "And get me manual control of the railgun batteries." His officers blinked. "Sir?" Cole stood up. "You heard me." A moment later, the controls linked directly to his command console. Cole exhaled. "This is it." Zyrex's warship rushed forward, glowing with the heat of its failing but still functioning engines. Cole took aim. The Zervax flagship was seconds away from impact. Then, he fired. The killing blow. The last 3 remaining railgun cannons on the human warship roared to life. The first shot punched through the Zervax flagship's weakened shields. The second tore through its engine core. The third, a direct hit to the bridge. Zyrex saw it coming. The round crashed through the viewport like a meteor, obliterating everything in its path. The impact sent Zyrex flying backward. His body slammed into the twisted remains of his throne. Fire erupted around him. For the first time, Zyrex knew true defeat. His vision blurred. The sounds of battle faded. And as the mighty Zervax warship exploded in a blinding inferno, Zyrex's last thought was bitter. How could they have won? Then, darkness. The aftermath. The human fleet watched as the Zervax flagship vanished into a cloud of debris and flame. Silence filled the void. Then, cheers erupted across every surviving human ship. On the command bridge, Hayes exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. "Holy hell, Cole, you did it." Cole sat back in his chair, exhausted but steady. "We all did." Reports flooded in. The Zervax fleet was in full retreat, leaderless, broken, beaten. The war was over. But Cole knew the real battle, the battle for survival, for lasting peace, was just beginning. The battlefield lay silent. The Zervax fleet, the once mighty conquerors of the galaxy, was shattered. What few ships remained scattered into the void, fleeing beyond sensor range. On board the human flagship, General Cole exhaled, letting the weight of the moment settle. "They're gone," Hayes murmured, her voice thick with disbelief. Cole nodded. "They'll regroup somewhere. But their empire, it's over." For the first time since the war began, Earth was safe. The galaxy reacts. The fall of the Zervax sent shockwaves across the cosmos. Across the known galaxy, species that had once lived in fear of the Zervax watched in awe. Some saw the humans as liberators. Others saw them as something far more dangerous. For the first time in history, a species had done the impossible, they had defeated the undefeated. And that terrified the rest of the galaxy. A choice for humanity. Back on Earth, Cole stood before the United Earth Defense Council. The victory celebrations had barely begun, but already, new challenges loomed. The galaxy was watching. Some alien leaders had sent messages of alliance, eager to forge bonds with humanity. Others whispered of preemptive action, before humanity's strength grew beyond control. The question now was what kind of species humanity would become. Would they rise as rulers, seizing power where the Zervax had fallen? Or would they choose a different path? Zyrek's final warning. As the Council debated humanity's future, a single transmission arrived, one no one expected. A distress beacon. From a damaged Zervax escape pod. Cole narrowed his eyes. Patch it through. The screen flickered. Zyrek appeared, wounded, but alive. His once proud armor was dented, his face bruised, but his eyes burned with undying hatred. You think this war is over, human? Zyrek rasped. Cole folded his arms. Looks over to me. Zyrek's lips curled into a sneer. You don't understand what you've done. Cole said nothing. Zyrek leaned forward. You didn't just defeat the Zervax. You changed everything. The screen crackled as Zyrek continued. The galaxy fears you now. They fear what you are, what you might become. You are not their saviors. His voice dropped to a whisper. You are their next threat. The transmission cut off. Silence filled the room. Cole's jaw tightened. The war was over. But the real battle, the battle for humanity's place in the stars, had just begun. A legacy forged in fire. Cole turned to Hayes. Get me a message to the Council. She nodded. What do you want to tell them? He took a deep breath. That humanity stands together. That we will not kneel. And that we will not seek war, but if war comes again, we will be ready. Hayes smiled faintly. Sounds like a good start. Cole gazed out the viewport, watching the stars. They had won this war. Now, they had to win the future. And humanity? Humanity was just getting started. Final life lesson. True strength is not in conquest, but in resilience. The greatest warriors are not those who seek war, but those who are ready when war finds them. The most feared warlords in the galaxy laughed and they heard about the tiny, fragile species called humans. Zyrek, supreme commander of the Zervax Empire, leaned back in his throne-like command chair, his golden armor gleaming under the dim glow of the war chamber. The room was filled with the echoes of guttural laughter from his high-ranking officers. A primitive species, barely out of their own star system, one of them sneered. They don't even have planetary conquest protocols. They fight amongst themselves. Zyrek's lip curled in amusement. It was true. He had studied the humans. They were a fractured race, plagued by war and division. Unlike the Zervax, whose empire had spanned thousands of years, humanity had barely scratched the surface of interstellar dominance. To the Zervax, Earth was just another conquest, a weak, unremarkable world that would fall in days. Their weapons are outdated. Their ships lack shielding. Their strategies? Zyrek chuckled. Predictable. This war will be over before they know it started. The warlords erupted into laughter again. A low chime interrupted them. Zyrek turned his head as his tactical officer, Kelvax, approached hesitantly. He carried a small holographic device. Supreme Commander, we've intercepted a human transmission, Kelvax said, his voice unusually uncertain. Zyrek waved a hand. Let's hear their desperate pleas. The war chamber fell silent as the transmission played. The voice was calm. Too calm. This is General Cole of the United Earth Defense Forces. We are aware of your incoming fleet. We have one message for you. A pause. The officers smirked. They expected the usual, terms of surrender, desperate bargaining. Instead, Cole's next words sent a ripple of unease through the room. Let them come. They have no idea what's waiting for them. Zyrek's amusement faded. He leaned forward slightly. His officers exchanged glances. There was no fear in that voice. No desperation. Just certainty. Arrogance, one officer scoffed, breaking the silence. They think they can resist us? Zyrek nodded slowly, but something gnawed at him. The humans were not begging. That was different. Still, he dismissed the thought. Order the fleet to advance, he commanded, his voice cold. I want Earth under our control within 72 hours. Kelvax hesitated for a fraction of a second before bowing and stepping away. The warlords resumed their laughter, but Zyrek didn't join in this time. He watched as the fleet's trajectory updated on the holographic display, countless Zervax warships piercing through the void toward the small blue planet. Humans had no idea what was coming for them. And yet, for the first time in his long, undefeated reign, Zyrek felt something unfamiliar. A flicker of doubt.